Well, that is so fetch because you guys can stream the original Mean Girls before you guys go see the remake musical in theaters this weekend. Try Paramount Plus for 30 days on us. Click the link in our show notes below. We hope you guys enjoy the podcast and remember, you are so fetch. Hey, welcome to Abyss Gazing, a horror podcast where we celebrate all things spooky and mental health.
I'm your co-host, Mark.
I'm your co-host, Josh.
I'm slightly confused at the moment, but we're all here for fun.
Wait till we get into talking about this movie. Um, and yeah, so we are joined by James Fox. He is the writer and co-writer. Sorry, he's the co-writer and director on the movie Crypto Shadows, which you guys can check out for yourself. VOD beginning January 16th. Got to meet him at last year's Genre Blast. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Happy to be here.
We are happy to have you, and I couldn't think of a more perfect guest for our Pandorum episode because there is a lot of similarities in narrative in both of these films. But can you kind of tell us a little bit about what Crypto Shadows is all about?
Sure. So, at its core, I like to describe Crypto Shadows as a kind of a mental health movie with a sci-fi twist. So, it's a character study. So it's one character through the whole thing. The character interacts with other people, but we only ever see her. And it's a story kind of about isolation and dealing with trauma, especially work-related trauma, and how your reality can kind of spin out of control. So. It's got some like conspiracy stuff. It's got some sci-fi stuff. It's all the things I like kind of packed into one movie.
Everybody knows how I like conspiracy stuff.
Yeah, Mark, this is right up your alley.
I know. The crazy is strong with this one.
Like, the dark, shadowy government agencies chasing people down and, all that fun stuff. So it's called Crypto Shadows because one of the fun things that we explore is cryptocurrency and how we're all kind of crowdsourcing the decryption of something that we don't really understand and what terrible, evil, lurking things could lie behind the code.
And the fact that I probably know a little bit more about that than I probably should.
Mark could have
Yeah,
been
me
a
too now.
consultant.
I am a fountain of useless knowledge. So yeah, there's that.
Nice.
One of the things that you mentioned how this movie has a lot going for it in terms of thematically with the the themes of mental health and specifically trauma and isolation and how those two kind of coexist and co-relate with one another. This movie is co-written by Amy K. DeBooth. Hope I said that last name right.
Duboff, yeah.
Duboff. Can you kind of talk about how important it was to capture those themes and have those be readily available and present, and how to depict those accurately in this movie?
Oh yeah. I mean, the film started out with that theme in mind. It was a story we wanted to tell. So our main character, Kara, she's a game developer, and she's fled the city life to her deceased grandfather's hunting cabin that got left to her to kind of recover in isolation. And some of the things we talked about right out of the gate was I know a lot of game developers. I lived in San Francisco for 20 years, and the burnout is real there. Like, some of the hours they work is just insane. And, some of the stuff that takes place during those late hours in the workplace with bosses and people is pretty nutty. So, when we initially started talking about story, we started talking about, like, hey, how can we shine a light on this and let people know a little bit more about it, raise awareness about like workplace trauma and some of the stuff that software developers kind of go through. And we kind of built the story. We had a kernel of an idea that I had back in the late 90s, early thousands, and kind of marry those two things together. And that's how we landed on the script.
So I know that this whole entire setting also was really cost effective for you because the the Kara's home throughout the course of this, we talked about this as genre blast, is actually your home.
Yeah, it's my ranch, my horse ranch. Yeah, yeah.
Dude, I'm totally jealous. I would love to live in a bunker in the middle of nowhere.
Right?
As
Uh,
long as long as I have internet to work, I'm good.
there we go. Yeah. No, it's took place on 70-ish acres of uh basically Sierra Foothill property just outside Yosemite National Park. So it's a beautiful location. It's super fun. And it was super cost effective for us. It was our COVID movie, right? So it was like we are trying to keep budgets really small. All of us were working on stuff, and then the COVID lockdowns hit, the industry shut down, but we were all ready for work. So it was like, how can we do something small enough that we don't trigger any of the COVID restrictions and we don't have to go anywhere? And that's how this movie was kind of born.
Mark is slowly slowly gonna take a vacation up to to your ranch. He's just
Anytime, you're
inviting
welcome.
himself.
Anytime.
Yeah, that thought's crossing my mind. I that was like my dream home is like 100 acres in the middle of the mountains. No
I highly
neighbors
recommend it.
anywhere.
I highly recommend it.
There is a level of ambiguity to this movie that you spend most of the time like trying to, like you talked about conspiracy theories, kind of like how does the conspiracy of, what we end up eventually finding out happened, but there's also this kind of ambiguity about the workplace trauma as well, to where it's never, and kind of also how she heals with it. It's, you can definitely tell that it's a sensitive subject. It's never outright addressed, but kind of also not necessarily spoon feeding it to the audience as well as. And when you guys were writing this, you and Amy, how important was kind of keeping this air of mystery around not only the character's past but also her future as well?
Well, it was interesting, right? Because she's a single character dealing with her own internal struggles. So it's not like she's gonna be super open about it. We're never gonna get that exposition of exactly what's happened. And the only time she really talks about it is when she's in a therapy session online, and um, we're assuming that she's already had several sessions before this one, right? So we don't really drop into, okay, now tell me all about this. It's spelled out in great detail. But the thing we really wanted to focus on was we wanted to write it in such a way that it was ambiguous enough that we was relatable to everyone. Not everyone is going to be able to relate directly with, like she's a woman programmer. I don't want to alienate the audience that can't experience the traumas that she's gone through just because they're a guy, right? Or whatever. So we wanted to keep it somewhat ambiguous so that everybody could relate with the way she was dealing with the trauma, not necessarily what the trauma itself was. And I think that was really challenging to write it that way. But what we really wanted to do was we wanted people to connect with the trauma response, how she was dealing with it, and the bumps along the way, not necessarily just the specific one thing. It's like, oh, she had this kind of trauma, this kind of like thing happened to her. I'm checking out mentally. The keeping people engaged and actively trying to figure out what that trauma was and experiencing it with her allowed for kind of more of a connective tissue between the viewer and Kara.
Go ahead, Josh. You look like you were going to say something. I have thoughts forming.
Ah, hmm. Now
You
with,
okay?
yeah, with the this ending, it's kind of like just this kind of, it's almost inception moment. You kind of get the source of all of her hunts and why she's being hunted. And I feel like there are so many like different avenues that you guys could have taken, or so many different areas, obstacles, so many different things that essentially that you could have made that out to be, but yet you guys kind of went with a more traditional choice. In that, I'm not going to obviously spoil it for you guys. You guys can check it out for yourselves on January 16th. But when you guys were crafting the end of this, that kind of mic drop moment, how many different endings did you guys kind of craft, or was it always kind of like this is going to be where everything ends?
Oh, a lot. I'd say probably about a dozen, actually. And the reason we went with kind of the more traditional ending is because the rest of the film is kind of out there as far as storytelling, right?
Mhm.
So we wanted to create kind of a grounded ending that people are a little bit more accustomed to, because it's like, if this is the path of the film, we're kind of way out here, and then we bring it back to something that people can kind of really sink their teeth into. So, um, and we saw this as a story that could potentially maybe even continue. So we wanted to create a story that wrapped this one up, but left enough meat on the bone that if we wanted to go back in and write a sequel, we could. So, um, and there's been talks of that happening. So we'll see what goes on from there.
To a small extent, there seemed to be some sort of almost influence from that old 90s movie, The Net.
Yeah.
That concept was there. And I remember back in the 90s, everybody was like, oh, that's ridiculous. Nobody can work from home. And
Yeah.
now it's reality. And it seemed like there might have been an influence from that.
Sure. The net hackers, even the chain reaction, if you remember that one,
Yeah,
the
vaguely
whole
with
like
Keanu Reeves.
with Keanu. Yep. Yeah, definitely. I mean, those are some of my favorite movies growing up, so I definitely there was some influence to that. And then one of the biggest influencers for me, the thing that gave us the kernel of the idea, that one of the things that I've wanted to tell the story of for a long time, ever since cryptocurrency really started becoming a thing. Cryptocurrency has always reminded me of the SETI at Home project. You guys remember that? Where you had the like screensaver that was patched into deciphering radio satellite data from the SETI project.
Yeah, that was kind of an interesting thing.
Yeah, crypto and the SETI at Home thing really are seem similar to me. So again, I don't want to spoil anything, but it was definitely one of the things that was on my mind while we were working on this.
I think SETI is actually still running, isn't it? Or
I
has
think
it
so. Yeah.
turned into a new project now?
I think SETI at Home is still a thing. I think you can still get that uh, screensaver.
Yeah, and the idea behind it was crowdsourcing computing power to help kind of go through all this data they were receiving.
Yep. Oh, it
Again,
looks like you can. Yeah.
yeah, again, the overwhelming wealth of useless knowledge I
I'm impressed.
One of the things that I think makes this movie so engaging and riveting was the performance from our lead actress, Michaela Iverson. And I with a movie like this, you have to have somebody that is going to be able to literally carry the movie. That's one of the things that either makes or breaks, as you said, like a COVID movie or a film circling around isolation, because we're spending, anywhere as little as 70 minutes to, 150 minutes with this singular character. How hard was it to actually find somebody that really embodied the vision that you guys had for this movie?
Uh, Not too bad actually. So I had the benefit of being a judge at several film festivals, and I had seen this one actor in a bunch of these movies that was super good. And sometimes she was the lead, sometimes she was supporting, but and regardless of how the project itself was, her performance was always phenomenal. And I worked on a project that had her connected to it, um, called Avocado Toast, a great comedy film, love it. And I finally was just like, you know what, I want to work with her on something, and I reached out and we started, a dialogue about a different project. But in talking with her about that project, I learned just like how intense she is. She's got like probably the best work ethic I've ever experienced in the film industry. She works super hard all the time. She's diligent. She's meticulous. And like just her acting chops are next or second to none. So as soon as we started writing this script, I was like, I know exactly who I want to play this. And I reached out to her and I was like, hey, would you be willing to fly out to my ranch for like a week and a half and hang out and shoot a movie? You're the only person in it. Do you think you can handle that? And she was like, yeah, get me tickets and let me know when. And that's kind of just how it went. And I honestly, I don't think the film would have been half as good with anyone else. She was incredible. I mean, some of the conditions that we were in were pretty intense. It was December in the mountains. It was snowing one day. It rained most of the time. So she's stomping around in the backwoods, and it's like 28 degrees during the day, and we're all wet and cold. And so there were moments where, especially some of the nighttime exterior stuff, where like her teeth were chattering so hard that I was like, this is never gonna work. Like she's never gonna be able to deliver this line or look scared because and I'd be like, all right, are you ready? And she's like, yeah. She'd take the jacket off and like her face would just calm. And it's like somehow she controlled that like involuntary shivering response, right? It was just so impressive. I like every day she impressed me in a different way. And I mean, I can't imagine even now, like I can't imagine doing it with anybody else. So it was really it was a fun experience for me as a director too, because like she wasn't reading lines off of anybody. Like there's no other characters there. So it's like I'm like 14 inches off camera, off screen in almost every shot, talking with her, being her internal monologue, being the person on the other end of the phone, or just whispering little prompts at her. And the fact that she could stay in character, stay in the moment, and be like directed in real time. I mean, I've never experienced that before. It was awesome. So,
Well, you guys can experience it for yourself when the movie Crypto Shadows hits VOD this upcoming Tuesday, I think it is, January 16th.
January 16th, yeah.
Wherever you guys get your movies from. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to be talking about the 2009 sci-fi horror film Pandorum. But our musical guest for this episode is To Be a King, which you guys can check out. We're going to be doing a night of heavy music and mental health with them, as well as Mount Etion. I hope I said that right, on January 25th. This song is called Fear Not. We'll be right back.
Sasha If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in the show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us.
If you guys love free stuff and love movies, then you guys should come check out Winter Horrorland Film Festival. It's going to be January 27th at the Richmond Public Library. Link is in the descriptions below. And you guys can also check out our vendors that we're going to be having: Love Always KB Painting, Moonstone Menagerie, as well as Twitchcraft Studios that you guys will be hearing from in the next couple of weeks. But as I said before the commercial break, we are here to talk about the movie Pandorum. And this is, again,
The sci-fi horror.
This was I don't know what the relationship between you guys and this movie is. This was a first time viewing for me. James, you being our guest, had you seen this movie before? Was this the first time for you?
No, no, no. I've seen it before. I want to say I saw it in the theaters even. Yeah, I don't know. I personally liked it. I thought it was interesting. I love the concepts of, like, Earth being overpopulated, and like that whole like hook is one that I like. One of the first sci-fi books I was exposed to was When Worlds Collide. So, that's like always like a way to get me interested, is like, oh, what happens when, the S hits the F on the Earth?
Josh.
I was so let me just preface this by saying I am not normally a sci-fi guy. There are a few exceptions to like sci-fi films that like I've seen and really loved. Um, and Pandora was just not one of them. Like, I had a lot of people tell me that this felt like Event Horizon, felt like it was like an unofficial sequel, and I was like expecting that like same level of like intensity and fun, because I really loved Event Horizon.
My favorite horror movie to date still. So
It's a great movie, and you should check out our great podcast that we did about it a couple years ago. But no, I was really bored by this movie. I'm sorry, Mark.
You're always bored by my picks. I see how it is.
That is not true. I praised you last week for Gremlins 2.
That's because
you can't win them all.
Everybody loves Gremlins.
This is also true.
Gotta sit there and act like I give you credit for one movie.
Well,
yeah.
I've go ahead.
Pandorum to me kind of always felt like the budget version of The Abyss, but in a spaceship instead of research facility underwater or mining rig. I forget what it is.
which Mark loved. This is one of his favorites.
It is.
And
I'm looking forward to March in the HD 4K release and
when
remaster.
when we covered it a couple years ago, I I actually protested how much I hated it. So, like, I don't know what it is specifically about the genre science fiction that I'm just like, it just like doesn't click with me. Like, there are very few films that like I've seen that I'm just been like, damn, like this was really good. I,
You're
I don't know.
anti-fun, Josh.
I'm not
Anti-fun.
anti-fun. Go back and listen to Gremlins 2 and Event Horizon.
Well,
That's
the funny thing about Event Horizon is it's a scary movie that like it could like theoretically possible, right? Like we don't know. It could be real. And that's what makes it scary for me is like, oh my God, like the science tracks, this could be real. Um, the to like I said, I like Pandorum, but the thing that I didn't like about Pandorum is that it was one of those things where it's like, in films, there's like, if the character went left down the brightly lit, like clean hallway, they wouldn't have a story. But if they went right down the dark and broody hallway with the lights flickering and the bloody smears on the wall, we have a story. There were a lot of those moments in Pandorum where it's like, if they just did the smart thing, the story would be over.
Yeah. It's very much like slasher aesthetic, like wisdom when you think a logic, I guess is the better word, when you think that a character, should take the obvious, route, as you said, like clean and shiny hallway. But no, if we do that, the story ends.
Right. Yeah.
And
why do you take the time to apply logic to horror movies? There is no logic in horror movies ever. Like we discussed last week with Gremlins 2, the whole movie shouldn't have happened from the opening sequence and Gizmo wandering out in the sun. Logic does not exist in horror movies.
That's not always true, but technically speaking, this is a sci-fi movie, so science implies logic.
Science does. Science fiction, however, does not.
Yes, but what makes a sci-fi movie actually sci-fi is that there is that level of fiction, but there is that real-world application of science that's applied to the fiction when telling said story.
I mean, you could try to go that route, but
Yeah, I think that I think Pandorum could have been a much cooler, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think isn't Pandorum like the name of an actual like syndrome or it's like a it's something. It's actually named after like the psychosis of being in deep space or something.
That's what they
So,
said in the movie. I don't
so
know if it's actually
actually,
real.
so according, apparently it is, I guess, most likely. So I typed in Pandora syndrome, and this is what came out. It's actually found in cats of all things, but Pandora syndrome is described as an ATO apathy. It's an pathological condition resulting from anxiety associated with chronic perception of threat. So yes.
Hmm, that's cool. Well, I think that if it had focused on that, right, like that aspect of like they wake up, they have this kind of like weird, like half amnesia thing, partial amnesia, like if it had just focused on like the Pandorum aspect, I think it would have been a really cool sci-fi movie, one that was like within the realm of reality. But
So
it kind of goes off into some weird stuff.
yeah, which is to your first point, let me address that. So the Pandorum disease is where the film derives its fictional slang term from. It is a form of psychosis caused by deep space and triggered by emotional distress, leading to severe paranoia, delirium, and nosebleeds. Honestly, I think this movie could have benefited from a smaller cast because it seemed like everybody that and Mark, I'm really not trying to poo-poo on your movie. I don't want this to be the whole podcast either, but I feel like,
I'm
you
used
know,
to it at this point. You
the
crap on
I
all my movies.
the idea of the idea of Bauer discovering, like Nadia, Leland, a lot of these other characters is, and is fine. It just doesn't. They just don't serve the story well. And I feel like that was kind of like largely my problem with it. And then to find out that Gallo was actually like a past version of Peyton was kind of like felt just kind of like a huge like middle finger to where, and I will say this, by the time that reveal came, I didn't see it coming, and I questioned all of my reality for the last 90 minutes up to that point. So, Mark, I will give you that they gave me a twist that kind of made me reevaluate the entirety of the movie. I didn't like it any better, but I respected it more.
Well, that's fair. I mean, as filmmakers, all we want is your respect anyway, right?
So Kong Lee being in it was kind of plot armor, so to speak, for holding off the cannibals at this point. Because the whole thing was they had been there on basically in this mission and cryo sleep and stuff for almost 1,000 years.
Mhm.
And it was they talked about at one point that they had genetics altered to kind of speed up evolution. So when they got to the new planet, they could evolve and adapt to it better. And instead, they end up crashed and stuck in the ship for like 800 and something years because it was 120-year travel. So you've got all these cannibals, which I'm not sure where they found enough food to keep alive, but that's besides the point. That's why it's
Why are you
fiction.
trying to apply logic?
I'm not. So Hong Lee was there to help fend off a lot of them as well as be the muscle. I don't remember what his character's name was, but I know him from mixed martial arts and old school K1 and stuff like that.
So his
Oh.
name in the movie is, I'm probably gonna mispronounce this, but I would pronounce it as man, but it's spelled MANH.
Huh. Well, he was speaking Vietnamese according to the subtitles.
Yes,
So,
yes, he was.
yeah, he's actually a very accomplished K1 kickboxer, Sanshute. I think he did pancrase for a little while and mixed martial art and a few different promotions. But he was making more money in acting. So he kind of retired. Yep. He fought in his later career. He fought like Michael Bisping, Rich Franklin, and a few of the other fairly big names.
Nice.
Yeah. But that was essentially his purpose, is to be the muscle. The girl, the teams that you see in the beginning when he first gets free, that kind of keeps disappearing on him. She was there more or less for the explanation. That was her plot point, to give the explanation of why there's all these creepy looking noseless cannibals running around and why they have turned into that and how they have turned into that. So that was their purpose for the whole thing.
Like, I really liked the cannibal aspect of it because I kept watching this movie and I'm like, all right, everyone keeps telling me this is a horror film. So far, this feels like a pretty traditional, like sci-fi movie, Lost at Space kind of thing. And then when you meet like Nadia and you kind of get to see the cannibal for the first time, like I really liked that. I felt like they probably came a little bit too late into the story for me. I don't know how you guys felt about it, but I really wanted more of them. They had great character design and felt like overall they just kind of did very little with them.
Yeah, I liked the design. I didn't from the explanation of, oh, it's an evolution thing. I'm not sure how well the design made sense. it was that was a little odd to me. Like why the whole noseless thing? Things like that just didn't quite make sense to me. But other than that,
To quote Rick James, cocaine is a hell of a drug. There you go. Explanation
Yeah,
solved.
I agree that they came in pretty late, but I think again it kind of comes down to this almost feels like two different movies to me sandwiched together. You
Mm.
know, I have that problem with a lot of horror films actually, where it's like the first half feels like something else, and then suddenly it takes a turn, and then like the rest of the movie is just people like running and dying and being chopped to pieces. And this feels like a sci-fi movie with a horror movie on the back half of it, right? So I think that, you know, again, it was maybe trying to be too many things at once. So like if it had picked a lane and stuck in it, I think it would have been better. But I personally really like the design of the cannibals. They are freaky. They remind me a lot of the thing in The Descent. If you guys remember that, like the
vaguely,
you know,
Yes.
it's been a long time since I've seen The Descent.
That's a
but
great movie.
it is, and I think the difference between the two, right, is like it very similarly themed almost, you know, but like the Descent gets to the business quick, you know, it's like they fall in, oh no, it's a girl adventure movie for the first 10, 15 minutes, buddy, like a buddy film, and then it's like, oh, it's not, there's something else happening, right? So this one kind of meanders its way to that.
I really wish I think this movie also like misses out. Like I talked about this earlier when we were talking about Crypto Shadows, is like it felt like there's a great parallel between both films, and where I think Crypto Shadows really succeeds is how it handles the subject matter of isolation and how that handles your mental health. And I felt like, you know, Bauer kind of going on this journey and really only knowing that, you know, Peyton is here, like this one really missed the mark on kind of jumping into the concepts of isolation, especially when it comes to, you know, the vastness of space, you know, because that's a truly terrifying thing to like wake up, realize that you are the only one until you discover that you're not. Uh, but you know, this movie I feel like really kind of missed the mark on that as well. And that's kind of what really hurt me in this one, is that like I was trying to think of like themes of like mental health to talk about with this movie, and felt like they got really close to it, and it then something happened to where it's like, okay, you made a point and then you ruined said point.
It's hard. I mean, in storytelling, it's like, you know, you don't want to beat people over the head with your message. So trying to figure out a way to sustain the narrative and sustain the point is tough. I mean, even with Crypto Shadows, you know, it's like there were several scenes that we wrote where we were like, oh, but now she's not isolated anymore. You know, like how can we achieve this feeling, this cinematic moment, but maintain this severe isolation that she's dealing with, and the trauma, and how, you know, this is too real. That's something we said all the time when we were writing. It's like, this is too real. Like we need to, as the audience, we need to question whether or not what's happening to her is real or not, and this is too real. We can't do that. So it sucks. So, you know, I understand why they did what they did, but yeah, I mean, it's hard. It's a balancing act.
I don't know. I think you did have very loosely, you've got a couple things you can apply to it.
Go on.
Because we've had family, like I said, loosely, we've had family dealing with memory issues, and that was part of the main plot, is they were waking up with no memory. And when you see somebody with like dementia that doesn't even remember that they're somebody's grandma,
Yeah.
or somebody that repeats the same stories in the same conversations over and over and over again, it's that's what came to mind watching the beginning of the movie is people that might have some sort of disorder that affects the memory, like dementia, Alzheimer's, things like that. And then you have the people trying to take care of them and how frustrating it can be to deal with somebody just repeating the same things over and over again or not knowing who you are on the far extreme.
That's a very fair point because it takes a lot of patience to deal with dementia patients. I remember probably the probably a year or two into my marriage, my grandmother got diagnosed with it, and it was actually so bad that she ended up not being able to come to our wedding because she had an episode. And I went and my wife and I went and visited her. She was staying with my uncle, and when I introduced my wife, she had it was like, how come I wasn't invited to the wedding? And, how do you tell somebody that has dementia that they had an episode that was the reason why they weren't there? Um, but also at the same time, like I've saw just being there for the very few hours, like I saw the pain and toll that it took on the family that was taking care of her and the amount of patience that was needed at the same time to endure that. And it also sucks to watch someone that you really love, that you care about, go through that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you look at it too. Some of those people require pretty much supervision almost constantly
Mhm.
at a certain point. And if you don't have the money to put them in some kind of home, because those places can be super expensive.
Yeah.
5, 10, 20 grand a month on some of them. Then you have to figure out how to manage a work schedule around taking care of somebody that's almost like an infant.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. I've got some limited experience in that from some family members as well. And it was tough. It was tough on the whole family,
How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations. Educate
I
break
did,
down
man. I'm not gonna
surrounding
lie,
mental health,
but also at the same
suicide,
time,
and
like,
depression.
I
And you
don't
get
know.
exclusive content that you can't get
That's
anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover,
Yeah.
and we'll do it. All it
Yeah,
takes to get started is to go
I
to
definitely,
patreon.com/victims and
Like I
villains.
said, I think I saw this in the
Or
movie
simply
theater,
click
so,
the
like,
link
that
in
might
the
have,
episode description wherever you guys are currently
there are
listening
very
or
few
streaming
movies
this
that I saw in the
episode.
theater
Pick
that,
your
like,
tier
I
and
hated,
get started today.
but there are
Yes,
definitely
it's
some that I,
that
like,
simple.
watched
So
later
quickly
at home, and I'm
select
like,
the
I didn't
tier
like
that
this
you
so
want
much.
and
So,
help us get hope
I think
into the
I think
hands
they're,
of the
I don't
depressed
think
and the
Pandorum is
suicidal
necessarily
today.
in that boat, but it had been a long time since I had seen it. So I remember liking it in the theater, and like, it was watchable. And there's a lot of stuff nowadays that's not watchable, especially in the sci-fi space. So it's kind of like revisiting an old friend that I didn't realize that I enjoyed spending time with.
Yeah, it's got those touches of fun and entertainment on top of its kind of brainless things that happen that you're like, what? That doesn't make sense at all. So it kind of meets all of it. It's just a brainless sci-fi film with little to no depth whatsoever. And you just watch it with low expectations for the fun of it.
I think I would have enjoyed this movie a little bit more had it been maybe 20 minutes shorter, like just clocking in at like 85, 90 minutes. Like this it's under 2 hours, but
But just barely. Yeah.
yeah, but
It's
there are so many moments of it that like just don't bring anything to the narrative.
so watching Norman Reedus get mauled in a pit didn't do anything for you.
No, sorry.
Oh.
I've got nothing to really add to that. Yeah.
Pre-Walking Dead, post Boondock Saints, Norman Reedus.
There you go.
All right. So like before we like kind of end though, like the reveal with like Gallo actually being a past version of Peyton. Like I brought this up earlier about like how it kind of like reshaped my thought process of the movie. Like, am I alone in that? Like, did this movie did you guys question like some of the things that happened in it after that reveal?
Yeah, for sure. Like when that reveal happens, you it's significant enough that you go, wait a second, maybe I wasn't paying attention. Yeah, you know. And it's funny because on the second one, like I said, I watched it in the theater, and then I didn't watch it again until we did it for this, right? And I I remember while I was watching it the second time going, like I knew there was a twist. I couldn't remember exactly what it was, but I knew there was a pretty cool twist. So I was kind of paying attention to the moments leading up to it. So and it's funny because even knowing that there was a significant twist, I was still surprised with the reveal at the end. So, I think that I say that and it sounds like a great thing. It sounds like a good thing, but then you go back and you start questioning the stuff at the beginning. And you're like, wait a second, that doesn't make any sense. Especially if you start to digging into the science and looking for that depth, you find that it's shallow water really quickly.
Yeah. And you also come to realize he's responsible for the entire events of the entire movie.
Right.
How they ended up exactly where they are. And he's responsible for the cannibals unintentionally. And almost a complete and total failure of humanity.
Right. Which like right at the end of the film makes him an unlikable character. So it's like we watch the whole struggle of this character, right? And we like we want to feel for what's happening. And then at the end, it's like, actually, it's all his fault.
Yeah. Oh, Quaid has kind of a mixed history with playing unlikable characters in some movies. He does a real good job at playing just kind of greasy, unhinged, unlikable characters. And at the same time, he does a good job in movies like Inner Space, playing the hero too. So he does a good job at what he does.
Yeah.
And I think over the years, he had his heyday in like the 80s and 90s, but I think he's done a handful of these movies where he's played the bad guy over the years that he really doesn't get the credit he deserves for.
I think it's to go off of what you're saying, I think it's the versatility of Quaid as an actor that you really buy him as this kind of this almost like really likable, almost borderline like hero guy character in the beginning of the movie, and then you find out that twist and it's like, oh man, like he's actually bad, he's evil, like he's responsible for everything, like you guys were saying. And I think that really, had another actor been here, you may not have had that same effect. And I think that's the making of like a, for all of my issues with this movie, like that's a really solid part to have in this because it keep moving everything forward and made the film engaging in its last moments.
Well, just like Michaela Iverson in Crypto Shadows, right? Dennis Quaid does a great job of kind of spearheading this film, right, and making you with all its weird moving parts and stuff happening all over the place. He became the through line a little bit, and it gave you something to kind of sink your teeth into and carried you through the film.
All right, well, yeah, with that, I'm gonna give you guys some trivia. So this Pandorum was the first film in a proposed sequel, but it is currently doubtful that the sequels will ever see the light of day, due to the first film as a low box office performance. However, it is in since also gained a cult following, And as a result, there is a Facebook group called Fans for a Pandorum Sequel that director Christian Alvart and writer Travis Malloy have also joined. So I feel like in the age of like Kickstarter, like anything is possible now.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, we are getting a Deathgasm too.
Yeah. I mean, we're also getting Deathgasm 2, like the Mutilator 2. We're also getting Mutilators like has a huge cult following to it as well.
And Heavy
Um,
Trip too.
Heavy Trip. Yeah. So like it's definitely 100% possible. So I don't know, someone make it. Whether or not you can get like the actors back is another story in and of itself, but you know, who knows?
Yeah.
I mean, the only ones you could really get back was the two survivors and whoever they decide to add in that were in cryotubes.
Ben Foster would be I
Ben
don't
Foster.
Ben Foster who plays Power in this. I don't think you can make a movie, a sequel, or any future sequels without him and uh
Ben Foster is another one that I feel like has kind of been overlooked through the years that does a good job in everything he's in. He plays a good. He was in 30 Days a Night and played that really creepy homeless guy wandering through the town, destroying all the
mhm.
cell phones and helping to get people stranded for the vampires.
Well,
And
and
he's
he's
go ahead.
go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
He's done lots of roles over the years and just he's one of those actors that's never really found his breakout role to get the recognition that he deserves.
Wasn't it Pandorum where he ate the bugs instead of making them do
Yes, it was.
like special effects? Yeah, like he like
Yeah.
literally ate real bugs or something. Like, come on, man! Like if you're an actor willing to do that, bravo! Like I'm there for it.
Yeah,
I think
he's never really gotten the credit. I think that he should have gotten by now.
and I think there are some actors that, you know, have made careers of being character actors or side characters. Like, yeah, like they have leading roles like this one. Like Paul Giamatti is one of my favorite actors, and the Holdovers, one of the best movies of the last year. But he's a guy that when you look at him, you think of like side characters that he's done. Like, yes, like, you know, Private Parts and Big Mama's House and you know, Safe Men and a lot of these other like weird roles. But then he's done these like very like big roles that are like John Adams or I can't remember what the that he played Chuck Rhodes, that other Showtime or Star series that he did recently. But Ben Foster is like a lot of those guys where Ben Foster has the capability to lead movies where we've seen him do it with Pandora. I believe he was in Hell or High Water with Chris Pine. But then he also has like the ability to just kind of be like a secondary or tertiary character, and regardless of where he's at in it, he always brings an A game.
Yeah, I've always really liked him. Hell or High Water was awesome. So yeah, and Paul Giamatti, like Billions.
Billions,
He
that's the one I was thinking of.
he's insane in that. You know, Ben Foster in what was the military one? Uh, was that Lone Survivor? It was Lone Survivor, right?
Yes, I think so.
I can't remember, but yeah, he does good stuff.
I think it was Leave No Trace is what you may be thinking of.
Oh, Leave No Trace. That might be it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. We're finest hours. Yeah. Um, Pandorum. Anything else you guys feel like you want to talk about or
It had a really awesome poster. I remember that. The poster was
yes it
rad.
Yes, it did.
Yeah.
The poster is pretty cool. It's sweet.
Yes. And just as sweet as candy. I don't know where I was going with that. Anyways, I was trying to do a segue. Where can
And you
people find
failed.
you online, James?
James B. Fox _ official at Instagram is probably where I'm the most active. But all my links and all my updates are at thejamesfox.com. It's where all my stuff is.
So we'll provide a link in the show notes below. Mark, are you back online, or you still like hiding out?
I got to finish up this project, and then there's going to be stuff going up.
So you guys could listen to Mark and me on past episodes of Abyss Gazing. You guys can check us out wherever you guys get your podcasts from. I am most active on Letterboxd over at Captain Nostalgia. And you guys can follow our parent company, Victims and Villains. We are on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Patreon, and wherever you guys get your podcasts from as well. So until next time, remember, the longer you gaze into the abyss, the more the abyss gazes back into you. We are leaving you guys once again. This is To Be a King, and the song is called Anarch. We'll see you guys soon.